This week's episode's inspired a new shirt design because I reckon it's going to be a good one, innit? It's a cryptid episode as well because it's been a while since we've covered one. I'm not really going to class dragons as a cryptid because a lot of people seem to have evidence for dinosaurs, and realistically a dragon's just a dinosaur, innit? Now, we did do the episode on dinosaurs and a separate one on dragons if you want to go back and listen to them. In my eyes, the last cryptid we looked into was one of the ones in my top two cryptids. I'd say that this is one of my top two, and the other one was the Tuscumbian space penguins. And in this episode, this one's all about some little guys, right, that wiggle the sticks at police officers. They hang around under a bridge in Loveland with the wands out. They're a suicidal alien species, whether it's suicide by cop or just throwing themselves under cars. It seems like they really want to test their own strength. Where could they have come from? What did he want? Where did he go when they can't be seen? What are they? I can answer that one straight away, mate. The Loveland Frogmen of Ohio. But first, let's have a song. This is Busker Flow by Kofi Stone. So for a few of you out there that have got no recollection at all of the Loveland Frogmen of Ohio, or LFOs as some people like to call them, at least since the start of this episode, in order for convenience, then the Loveland Frogmen of Ohio, the LFOs, they're a type of cryptozoological species, and they've got a Latin name as well, which is Rana erectus, which gives it some form of air of authenticity in it to the species, and erectus kind of sounds seductive as well in a way. Rana as well. Rana sounds like it'd be like a nice woman's name, do you know what I mean? And then Rana erectus. You could imagine a porn star calling herself Rana erectus. Maybe a nerdy porn star who's massively into her aliens, possibly. Maybe, though, possibly even a fat porn star, Rana erectus. Depends where you put the emphasis in it. Because if you go Rana erectus, the Loveland Frogmen of Ohio. But if you go Rana erectus, it's like, this is some fat chavvy bird, innit? And he's fucking selling pictures of her tits and stuff. But you'd still be like, yeah, good on you, love. Well in, Good on you for choosing such a good name. And that's what they've done there, the cryptozoological people, the cryptozoologophiles. Now that probably implies that they fuck Bigfoot. But maybe they do if they're giving it such a sexy name. Anyway, my point is, it really solidifies them as a species. It makes you think, well, there must be some form of truth to it as well, because they've given it a decent name. And with a decent name like that, you can kind of imagine David Attenborough mentioning them at some point in a TV show. Like that saying, like David Attenborough walked with mammals so that dinosaurs could run, and David Attenborough ran with dinosaurs so that cryptids could fly. And then I guess the next bit would be David Attenborough flew with cryptids so that the extra dimensional entities could materialise and dematerialise. Now, for the purpose of the show and to make it easier to understand, I'm only going to refer to LFOs as the Loveland Frogmen of Ohio, because some people do refer to these as the Loveland Lizardmen of Ohio, but that's kind of tricky to say. Plus, I really like saying the word frogman. Plus, the t-shirt that I've had designed is based on a frogman. Plus, I also sell little wooden Loveland Frogmen of Ohio, so if you want them, worldaroundyou.com. But we'll crack on with the show before we start fucking asking you for money and that, eh? Now, I don't want you thinking as well, part of that is I don't want you also thinking that I'm confusing the lizard people, like the reptilians or the Dracos and that. I don't want you thinking that I'm confusing them with the frogmen, because they are very different. They're not the same in it at all, from what I can tell. The lizard people are in charge. The reptilians are right at the top. The Dracos, right at the top. Loveland Frogmen of Ohio, not a mention in the hierarchy of the lizard payroll and that, what I've read into. So these are more of a mystery rather than something that we know about, like the Greys. And we will reference the Greys episode in this, so if you've not listened to the Greys episode, maybe go back and listen to that first and then come and find this again. But we'll get the Loveland Frogmen of Ohio. The clue's in the name, innit? They're normally seen in Ohio in America, but it's even more specific than that. We can pin them down to a specific county in a region called Loveland County. That's where they only seem to be seen, and mostly as well next to somewhere called the Miami River. So it's very, very specific compared to Bigfoot or Woodwalls in England, if you remember the Bigfoot episode. They seem to just be everywhere and proper roamers and travellers. Now, I had a little Google of Loveland as well to see if there's anything interesting about there. And there's been a few famous people moved there. There's Steve Brown, the darts player from England. I think he's retired as a darts player now. And also Jerry Springer as well. I think he was the mayor there. He might not have been exactly there, but he was a mayor of somewhere near there. So a wide variety of people get drawn there, innit? You've got massive names like international athletes like Steve Brown, and then big names off the telly and all like Jerry Springer. Now, when I looked into it and I looked into a bit of their lives as well, I did look into a bit of Steve Brown's life because I do like me darts. And you learn a bit more about Loveland, Ohio as well, because Steve has claimed that his hobbies include catfishing and visiting cemeteries to look at people's graves, and famous people's graves, and not just the peasants' graves, just they've got to be of stature for Steve. So that raises a couple of questions in my head, doesn't it? Like, why are celebrities luring people to meet them on the internet in Loveland, Ohio, for a start? And why is there enough celebrity graves there to keep Steve so preoccupied with this activity that he can claim it's a hobby? Now, a weird thing I did find on the Wikipedia for Loveland, I want to call Loveland, but Loveland seems like how you would pronounce it. They've got the headquarters there for a fireworks company, and there's a hyperlink to it as well on the Wikipedia page, but that doesn't actually open up a Wikipedia page. Now that seems pretty fucking suspicious, innit? Like, what are they hiding there? And it's made me wonder if the associated chemicals from fireworks, are they what's resulted in the Loveland Frogmen of Ohio? But that by having the headquarters there doesn't necessarily mean that the factory's going to be next to it, innit? Because why would you put all the important people of the firework business next to the explosives? You know, you've got all the labourers packing in the the banging chemicals, the boom dust into toilet rolls. Why would you then put the bosses next to that? That'd be like having an army base and being like, we're going to keep the president here or the prime minister here as well in the middle of this, in this war zone, and all of the important people making decisions. We're just going to disregard technology, no phone calls, nothing, not even a letter, not even a carrier pigeon. Put them all there behind the same fence. They wouldn't do it, mate. It wouldn't make sense. So, but there was other suspicions about fireworks that I have, which I'm glad this came up really, because we're going to cover that in an episode that I'm going to call Big Bang, and we're going to look into how Big Bang profiteered off the back of domestic terrorism in the UK. But we might have a little guest for that. I might organise a little guest for it. Back to the LFOs though. They're about 3.5 foot tall when they walk on their hind legs. They got webbed feet and hands like a frog. And I once read that they can be seen to be wearing silvery trousers, like a silver pair of jeans. But I wasn't able to source that information for this episode, so that's going to be the only mention of it. And it does feel like a lot of information about the Loveland Frogmen of Ohio has been retconned and changed over the years. Because I knew a lot about these, and then when I've read about it, things have been changed. It's like, right, that's fucking weird, innit? Where's that come from? That didn't used to say this stuff like this. Because I used to read this stuff quite a lot, innit? I used to sit about and this is what I would read when I was, let's call it doing nothing of an evening after college. Now, the witnesses range in it from policemen to Hell's Angels, but they all say that the Loveland Frogmen of Ohio had leathery skin, and if anyone's going to know what leather is and what it looks like, it's going to be the Hell's Angels, innit? Now, I'm not going to focus on the chapter of Hell's Angels that witnessed the LFOs this week, because I don't know, but most of the witnesses also claim that the tops of these creatures' heads have these big wrinkles in them. You know, like if a person was to have hair, well, where they would have hair, they've got these massive wrinkles. And they've been seen to use tools and all, so they're at least as intelligent as a raven or a chimpanzee. Maybe even smarter, mate, than a chimp. There's even a possibility that they've got knowledge beyond even our understanding of the world and all. But before we get into that, let's have a song. This is Nolan Ryan by Hoodie Allen. I figured it'd make the most sense to go over the sightings of the creatures in chronological order, because otherwise this would be a fucking brain melter, it would just make you feel fucking weird and ill. You're like, why is he going from 1972 now to, why is he going back in time? So it wouldn't make any sense. So I want you all to cast your minds back to 1955, right? Rosa Parks wasn't quite in the papers yet. America was soon to launch its first nuclear-powered submarine, the USS Nautilus, which, whilst they were pretty close to powering the first town in Idaho with a nuclear reactor as well, so it's fair to say there was an air of change in the air, if you like. A Knight of Guinness decided to start recording all the happenings of the world with the first Guinness Book of Records. Wasn't the world record yet, because America wasn't involved. America likes to put the word world in front of it, doesn't it, to involve itself. World War One, World War Two. Probably wasn't world until they got involved. The World Series, mate, which I think is a baseball thing the Americans do. There's all sorts of stuff, and but besides the point, getting distracted. Speaking of war, though, America started their 20-year war against what I think were the Chinese in a place called Vietnam, where the Chinese weren't. Disneyland opened in California. John Wayne died of cancer, along with, I think it was 4 of his co-stars from the film called The Conqueror, after filming scenes in Nevada, a nuclear testing site, mate. So lots of nuclear power, nuclear energy is in the news a lot at this point. The microwave oven, speaking of nuclear stuff, that got thought up. A shop called Sears, Sears, don't know how you pronounce that, Sears, it's all in capitals, so I guess Sears in America, that accidentally gave millions of children the phone number for a very secret defense department known as NORAD at the time. Well, known as NORAD now. Back then it was called CONAD, which is quite a good, probably a better name, I would imagine. So the Sears actually used the newspapers to get all of the children to phone in and to say something. I think it was to say something about Father Christmas or something. Now, but I was thinking, could this have been a way that the invading Loveland Frogmen of Ohio were able to land undetected, because NORAD had to start tracking Father Christmas across the skies to keep the lie of Christmas in the kids alive, otherwise capitalism would fail, especially in such a time where they're really against communism as well. So they needed capitalism. They needed Father Christmas to no longer wear green and wear red, which is weird because you would think they'd want Father Christmas to still wear green, because red was very communist. So by having Father Christmas who is red, you could argue that the communists thought up Father Christmas, or the communists actually ironically own Coca-Cola, and that's why they changed they bought that and used that to manipulate society, potentially, in my head. And then they used that to change Father Christmas to red so that they could get communism in the public eye more and more, and the acceptance of the colour red by having one of the biggest corporations in the world. Don't know if it's true, but it's worth thinking about. You could also think, was it just some other massive corporation, and they were showing who owned Sears, let's say, and they were showing like a display of power in it, showing that they could weaponise the public against the government itself. Feels very mafia-ish, to be honest. I don't know, I'm just saying. Speaking of corporations, though, McDonald's started up this year as well. The song Mr. Sandman was in the charts. Now that's a song about speaking to another worldly being and requesting them to materialise the singer's fantasy. So, a lot of fantastical things in the zeitgeist. Lots of huge changes taking place. So, now that we've got an idea of what it was like to be in America back then, I think we're in a good position to explore the first sighting. So, it's May the 5th, 1955.
Choose your character.
You're a travelling Bible salesman, a member of the local Hells Angels chapter, a businessman of undisclosed business dealings, or you're simply just a college student looking to get his little chipolata nuzzled by his girlfriend at Makeout Point. Which, choose who you are. Doesn't matter who you pick, because you're just going to end up button bashing anyway. So I figured we'd just cover everything that I found. We'll take it slow. So people seem to be in disagreement about this initial sighting, but every sighting is placed on May the 5th, 1955, and they all take place at 3:30 in the morning. There's one that's a bit like, it's about 3:30 in the morning, but the others are categorically 3:30 in the morning, so we're going to stick with 3:30. So for anyone listening who's into numerology, that, in a way, gives you the number 33, which seems to be included within a lot of things conspiratorially, like it's some weird message. It was even in last week's episode about the devil, if you remember. The devil took 33% of God's angels with him. Now, that hour and that time is also known as the witching hour, where the so-called divide between worlds is at its thinnest. But the very next day would be a full moon as well, so I don't know if that's relevant to these creatures and their sighting or not. But let's stick with the businessman for now. You've picked the businessman, you've put him in his alternate clothing as well. Now, he was driving along the road between Miami River, there's Miami River again, and Clement County. So let's say Branch Hill, Loveland Road, after looking on a map, just on the outskirts of Loveland. From what I can tell from Google Maps, it's the southern side of Loveland as well. Now, the unnamed businessman, let's call him Tigbity Dave, is driving along the road in the middle of the night after harassing people on the new build housing estate to see if any of them would be interested in these newfangled microwave ovens he's been carting around. So Tigbity Dave's out flogging his microwaves in the early hours of the morning, which, to be honest, seems like a great way to convince busy people that they need to speed up the cooking process, because they might be able to actually fit in some sleep if they can save themselves 25 minutes off cooking their evening meals each night. They can fit a little power nap in that 25 minutes that they've saved of having things in the oven for, because you don't want to fall asleep with your food in the oven in case you don't wake up and you've got a house fire. That's why chip pans got faded out and people don't really have them anymore. That's why everyone's got microwaves instead of chip pans and no one eats nice food anymore. Now, we don't know if he did manage to sell any microwaves, and I do wonder, could it have been a possible radiation leak from the microwaves in the back seat of his car that caused what happened next? Not in the way that he was hallucinating from some form of radiation sickness. I don't mean like that. Radiation sickness can take a little bit of time to affect you. More like when that story of the aliens flying over that missile silo and it deactivated a load of nuclear warheads. Now, maybe because it was only one guy, the aliens that pilot the ships might have contracted out the mission to some more terrestrial species that have already touched down and know the lay of the land. They'd already settled. Or maybe the Loveland Frogmen of Ohio work as some form of soldier of fortune, like that fella called Chuck that me and Jimmy spoke about in episode 14 of Truth Seeking. Interplanetary mercenaries, mate. Maybe even the most realistic version of the Men in Black without the disguises in place. Or maybe they were the Men in Black. For some reason, though, Tigbity Dave was more likely to stop for a group of 3-foot-tall humanoid frog creatures in the middle of the night than he was for a group of strange men in suits, which does make sense in the middle of the night, in the dark, by a river, in a place that you probably don't know if you're a travelling salesman. I can't imagine many people stopping for 3 Ingrid Cole-looking people, but to catch a glimpse of 3 frogmen, you probably would stop, wouldn't you, if you saw that? You'd be like, what the fuck is that? Rather than 3 blokes in suits all grinning at you, you'd be like, nah, fuck off, and you drive on. Now, the microwave salesman did get a good glimpse of them. He got at least 3 minutes. There's that number 3 again, 3 frogs, 3:30, 3 minutes to look at the creatures. He reported that they all had leathery skin, webbed hands and feet, and that were, looked like they could move around as well, dexterous, let's call it. Heads like that of a giant frog. No hair on the heads, but instead of hair there was deep wrinkles. Plus, these heads rotated towards him, like an owl. When the frogmen, as they're known then, if you like, noticed the bloke was hanging around one of them, because of, what's got to be the bravest act of anyone ever spotting a cryptid. What he did was he bibbed his horn at him as if to shout, "Ooh, chase me," out the window of his car, out of his sunroof, clambering over the microwaves. So after hearing the horn, one of the creatures raised this stick in his hand, maybe some form of twig that he was inspecting. But then the twig started firing out sparks, mate, which scared the shit out of the door-to-door microwave salesman, and he floored it down the street, possibly jettisoning microwaves out the windows to increase his top speed. So he's probably swerving all over the street as well. Now, this could have led to the first reported death caused by aliens, but unfortunately, nobody got hit by that car or a stray microwave because it was so late at night. Which is pretty convenient, isn't it? Now, that's the established version of events for the 5th of May 1955, but there is 2 other slightly different stories circulating on the internet as well. This time, let's imagine you pick someone else. Your mate's already picked the microwave salesman, so you've got to pick the Bible salesman. Let's call him Jezza. Right? Jezza was done harassing people for the day and he was heading back to his motel. He'd noticed that more people tended to answer the door and respond to his knocks in the night because they're less likely to be at work. Plus, people are going to tend to look out of the bedroom window if you knock on after midnight. Now, he was speeding home because it was the witching hour and he was a religious man selling Bibles, so he was terrified of the monsters and demons that might get him. But he was intrigued by what he thought were 3 men huddled under the Loveland Bridge. Now, it's difficult to guess why a probably religious missionary would be, interested in 3 strange men underneath a bridge. But he was. and he approached slowly in his car, making sure to alert them to his presence with his headlights, flashing them like a doggo would with his lights, not getting his dick out. He was a Bible salesman, he wasn't going to be so overt with it. Now, this obviously pissed off one of the frogmen because he ran at the car and launched himself at the bonnet and windscreen. It's at this point here where it becomes pretty obvious it was an encounter with an alien species, because Jezza suffered a bit of time loss in what he described as a blackout. Now, missing time's usually an indicator of some form of alien abduction, so there is a good chance that they took Jezza to experiment on him, and there are some rumours out there that they took a sample of his sperm, This, but you got to remember that this was back before they knew they also needed an egg to grow a human. Which does make sense, they were frog-like creatures, and because they'd remember when they were the Loveland Tadpole Boys of Ohio. But it's not like that, though, for the native primates of the planet. This also proves that the frogmen aren't responsible for Bigfoot, because they'd know about the primates' breeding habits in it otherwise if they'd made Bigfoot. So they can't be anything to do with each other. So they can't be associated with the Greys, which solidifies my theory that they could be some form of mercenary species out doing work for other aliens. There's a third version as well of this first encounter. Now, obviously, there's a chance that these are all separate encounters, but they're all recorded as separate versions of the first. But I reckon that's just done so that people don't panic, innit? Because we know what happened with Bigfoot. People became aware of them and then scared of them. Today's episode is brought to you by HelloFresh. Do you feel like you're stuck in a dinner rut? With HelloFresh, you get fresh, pre-measured ingredients with mouth-watering seasonal recipes delivered right to your door. Skip all those trips to the shop and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun and affordable. You can now enjoy cooking and get dinner on the table in half an hour or less, with over 25 recipes to choose from every week. There's something for everyone to enjoy. All recipes are designed and tested by professional chefs and nutritional experts to ensure deliciousness and simplicity. I've got my eye on some chicken enchiladas with wedges with cheese and sour cream. That sounds pretty nice. There's a pork chili and rice burrito bowl which looks quite nice as well. And I do like the idea of this quick butter chicken masala as well. It's got ginger rice, mate. I've never had ginger rice, so that sounds pretty good, that. But if you want some, go to the link in the show notes to get 50% off your first box and then 35% off your next 3 boxes. That's the link in the show notes for 50% off your first box and then 35% off your next 3 boxes. HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit. By the way, show notes means the description or the thing below the episode. I'll get back to the show. But he seemed to be suppressing the information about how Bigfoots can turn into moths and shapeshift, And that's just one example of how information gets suppressed from the public about cryptids. Now, this third iteration of the encounter seems to work best if it's the college students that's seen them. And I'll explain why, I will explain why. So, let's imagine they are at some form of make-out point, as Americans like to call it. Then that means that a lot of people congregate there to have sex or at least enter into some form of sexual activity. And if we learn anything from the Greys episode, apart from the perception filters around the Earth that might be there, it was that sex can open portals to different dimensions. Alistair Crowley was able to fuck his little manservant friend up the arse for hours on end until they eventually were visited by a creature from another dimension. So, what if Alistair had just decided to bugger Victor Neuberg in a place where people have been going and shagging for years? Is it the intention of fucking to weaken the boundaries between dimensions, or is it the accumulative shagging in a particular area that weakens the border between dimensions? If it is the latter, then these locations are more prone to incursions from alternate dimensional entities, which would go a long way to explain the Mothman that chased those 2 couples in the car that were probably shagging in the car, and does add a few questions, though, to why Claude Edwards had the Tuscumbian space penguins land near his barn full of, cows and that. But maybe there's just all matter of life out there. Maybe they're not all extra-dimensional. Maybe I've been wrong. Maybe there's extraterrestrials, subterranean entities, and extra-dimensional entities all in existence, along with us and everything that's already here on Earth, the terrestrials. So the third interpretation of events is a lot like the second interpretation. They see the frogmen under the Loveland Bridge in a good mood, and probably hoping to get their hearts both racing again after no doubt he's just disappointed his female companion up at Makeout Point. So he pulls his car over in the hopes of seeing if he can spook her into grabbing him so he can get a good feel again, Because what he thought it was, he may have just thought it was 3 drug addicts under the bridge huddling round, sparking lighters and that. I don't know what it was like in the 50s. I imagine it was rife, mate. They didn't know it was bad then. It was good then, wasn't it? It was good stuff. But now they look down on it now, just like they look down on people that believe in cryptids, And everybody knows how good drugs can be. So everyone must have an idea that cryptids must be real, but using that logic. But anyway, so what he thought were 3 drug addicts approached the car, and he probably locked the doors, and he's trying to turn on his girlfriend, isn't he? Get her excited, get her scared, a bit nervous. And he can be like, I'll protect you, I'll drive us to the car park away from these guys, and then you can fucking suck me little pecker again, And she'll be like, oh, you saved me, flicking her hair behind her ear, being like, I don't know what I'd do without you. And then he's like, yes, buzzing. Well, I'll show you what you can do with me. But it turns out that the 3 figures under the bridge, they might not have been drug addicts at all. And they were reported to be having a very animated conversation, maybe even an argument. They weren't actually gestating out of frustration towards each other about who gets the last hit of the pipe. There's a good chance they were actually arguing about one of them failing to charge the cloaking devices or wasting the battery on the cloaking device after watching all that tadpole porn on the ship on the way there. Now we can try and imagine how that conversation went. Look, I'm just saying, I think it's weird you watch it when we're with you. Why don't you go to your quarters? Yeah, we all have our thing, man. Who are we to judge? Whilst you're at the pond last week, I had Quarks here dressed as a chupacabra before we fucked each other. I just can't help myself. I think I've got a problem. I never looked for it. I'd been licking Jess's back, and then went to bed and woke up with my eye screens on frogsporn.com. Oh, I've done that as well, to be fair to you. But it didn't do anything for me. I tend to go on Toad in the Hole. Have you ever been on Axolotls Gone Wild? Will you two focus? Yeah, man, we all have a problem. The cloaking's fucked though now. I can spot us some battery if we need it, but what's the chance of a primate being here at this time? And then they all laugh. Ha 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 ha. Sort of thing. Just to be clear, we don't judge you for watching all the pollywog porn. It's not my thing. Whatever makes you spawn, I guess. You do you. Yeah, man, what we're angry about is your lack of forward thinking and ability to... You hear that? Oh, shit, a monkey, man. Quick, plug your end in here. It was probably something like that, I'd imagine, but from the young guy's point of view, he just saw 3 dark figures under a bridge bickering. Then they got the wands out and covered themselves in sparkles, at which point the lovers did a runner. Let's have a song and then we'll look into the sightings in the 70s. This is Little Moment by Omar Lynx. So the year's 1972. The animated classic Space Jam is very far away from yet gracing cinema screens. David Bowie has been sowing the seeds of intergalactic entities into the unsuspecting minds of the Western world, possibly readying them for a lifetime of alien abductions and maybe for the continued sightings of cryptids. Pong was lurking on the horizon, more than likely a nice little way of introducing the idea of an ethereal barrier and the exchange of messages represented by a moving ball on a screen. Conspiracy theorist favourite George Carlin was arrested and may have been forced to turn on his morals, but I've got no evidence for this. A few months after the sighting of the Loveland Frogmen of Ohio, a bunch of guys were caught after Tom Hanks made a phone call, resulting in the event known as Watergate. Could this have had something to do with the aliens that were seen 3 months prior? According to something I read on the internet, it was 1972 when the rumour of Walt Disney being frozen was started by a bloke from a cryogenics facility. So another link to Disney with these beings, like the 1955 when they opened up in California. Lots and lots of suspicious things were happening in this year. But on the 3rd of March at 1 o'clock in the morning, that's when the event happened, and that's what we're going to focus on, because that's when the second sighting of the Loveland Frogmen of Ohio took place. And I'll be honest, it's probably the best sighting, and it comes in 2 parts like any successful story does. The Godfather, Kill Bill, Hot Shots, and the Mummy films with Brendan Fraser in them. The first sighting takes place 16 years, 9 months and 27 days after the original sighting by the microwave-selling Bible-bashing college student. Now, I thought I'd try and look into the numbers for you to see if there's much significance. to see if what we can work out why there was such a big gap between the two. And the only significant thing comes from when you change into various measurements of time, and then we can find a few interesting things about those numbers. So if you read the time of 16 years, 9 months and 27 days as 8,851,680 minutes, which kind of sounds like that song, 8,851,680 minutes. Then it correlates into butyrophilin, which is some form of regulator with a bit of a code name that is used for the immune response in humans. It's like a protein kind of thing, a rhizome. But that's not all. The amount of minutes is 147,528 hours, which as a number correlates with a very deep green colour in the RGB scale. Frogs tend to be green, so it does seem a little bit suspicious to me. But if we couple these numbers and their associations with the fella moving radioactive microwaves, then what all that adds up to is the sightings being a result of some form of sickness, possibly a radiation sickness, like I was suggesting earlier. But on the slim chance the dates are a mere fluke, we should probably still look into the details of the sighting. So we've got a good witness here, a solid witness that we can trust, a local copper by the name of Ray Shockey, right? And he were driving slowly because of the ice on the road on the 3rd of March 1972. We even know a very approximate area of the town he was at from how it's reported. I think it's the riverside road called Kemper Road, which will be next to Miami River. He had to apply his brakes, right? Slam his brakes on, like, yeah, because he saw a dog run in front of his car. And in America, you're not supposed to run dogs over, I guess. Like here, you're supposed to hit the dog if it comes into the road. You're not supposed to, not hit it. You've got to get it. You shouldn't be slamming on your brakes. It's dangerous, especially on an icy road as well, next to a river. This guy was really taking some chances. So we're learning a lot here about Ray Shockey. But the dog, quote unquote dog, was then started lying down in front of his car, and then it leaped like a frog straight at his windscreen, mate. Then it stood on two legs, turned to look at him, and stepped over the guardrail before disappearing down the embankment to the river. Now, Ray was a police officer, like I said, so whilst most people don't trust coppers, we've got to respect the skills at profiling people. He claims the creature was somewhere between 3 and 4 feet tall as it was walking away from him, and looked up to be about 5.5 stone in weight or so. So if you imagine an obese toddler, like a morbidly obese toddler, and then probably give that toddler a big pair of shoes and maybe an expensive hat, you're getting quite close to the size of it. Except Officer Shockey is quoted as saying that it looked like a frog or a lizard. So not a toddler at all, not a stray toddler, like some people could think. But we know it can't be a lizard because the roads were icy. It's more likely to be a frog, but even then it's not very likely just a normal frog. But it can't be a lizard with icy roads. So where would the lizard be getting the energy from in the middle of a cold, icy night to not just run around, but to leap at a car and then use the extra energy of walking on its hind legs? There's no chance it's a lizard, mate. And for once, I think everyone listening is going to agree with my logic. And I looked into it, right? And there is a boot factory very close to this area, and that's got pipes that apparently expel warm water into the surrounding areas and the river. And I do suppose, it's a possibility that the lizard could keep warm near those. But why does this lizard look a lot like the frogman from 16 years ago? Could the chemicals in boot making, right, be making the frogmen by forcibly evolving the lizards into humanoids? But surely, right, if you was to believe that, the chemicals must change over 16 years. Plus, how do we explain the seemingly magical wands of the frogmen? Are the frogmen appearing there because that's where they were born and that's where they have to return to, like a normal frog would or a salmon would? Is that where we get the bootstrap paradox from? Because it's by a boot factory and they've got to go back to where they came from because they made themselves a pit there and that's where they come from. It's difficult to be 100% certain, guys. Let's have a song. This is Freeze Tag by Terrence Martin, Robert Glasper, Ninth Wonder, Kamasi Washington, Dinner Party and Felix. So after the creature ran down the embankment, he says that the leathery creature escaped into the river, which brings up my main question from my C-word episode. Is water real? Is it what we're actually told it is? Because if this otherworldly creature could disappear into water whilst everywhere was icy, that implies that there must be some interdimensional properties to water that we're kept in the dark about. Not many creatures can break through ice without a horn or something, or a significant weight and force, let alone survive jumping into icy cold water whilst presumably being some form of cold-blooded creature if we're to believe the cynics. They couldn't do that unless it was some form of cryptid or unknown creature. Could water just be like a terrestrial equivalent of like a black hole? We can't see water, only what's in water or through water, kind of like with a black hole. We can measure the effects of water through things like erosion or those rings that get left on coffee tables, just like how we can only measure the effects of black holes but not the actual black holes. Anyway, the whole event shook up Ray Shockey, and he told people back at the office at the station, leading another copper to go and investigate the area, and he found some claw marks on the guardrail, pretty much where Ray had described the sighting took place. But those weren't the only two police officers involved in the 1972 sighting. There was another, and we're going to call him Mark Matthews, because that's what his mother called him. So 2 weeks had passed by in Loveland since Ray saw the frogman, and Mark Matthews is out on the beat, and a little bit like Ray, he thought he saw an animal in the road, except this time the animal was injured. With hindsight, this seems like it could be the LFOs using bait to try and lure in prey. Mark wanted to try and keep people safe, innit? Presumably the ice has got to have passed by now a couple of weeks later, and it's beginning to warm up with spring and that, so having a dead dog or some other form of medium-sized animal, a large raccoon or a massive fox or something, that would be a hazard to incoming traffic or oncoming traffic or anyone in the road, basically, in a car or on a bike. So Mark got out of his car, but the animal wasn't dead. It just fucking tapped the circle button, mate, and went from prone to crouched. This surprised Mark Matthews, so he double-tapped it with his police-issued handgun. The frogman walked towards the guardrail whilst maintaining eye contact with Matthews, presumably clutching at its wound. To be able to do this, though, you got to assume that the frogman walked backwards in it to keep eye contact because of the way the eyes are on a frogman. And that's what inspired the new shirt you can find on my website on worldaroundyou.com. It's the Loveland Frogmen of Ohio with his cock out. And I got an artist called JJADX Official on Twitter to do after they did such a good job with the Mothman shirt. So if you'd like a Loveland Frogman of Ohio with his cock out t-shirt, go to my website. Now, as the LFO clambered over the guardrail, Mark noticed that this one seemed to have a tail, which is why some people refer to these creatures as the Loveland Lizardmen of Ohio. Initially, Mark spoke about it and claimed to have dragged it into his car at the time, describing it as a tailless lizard, even though he'd explicitly told people it had a tail. Some are happy with this, though, and claim it's an iguana that had escaped its tank somewhere, but personally, I don't buy that, innit? Because he's changed his story quite a few times in order to try and protect his career, I imagine. Because he was a career copper, he moved through a few different areas, being a police officer there, maybe getting moved on after the Men in Black kept coming and giving him aggro, over telling people about the lizard men and the frogmen. I'm not sure. Mark Matthews has also come on out and he said that he doesn't believe in any cryptids at all. So that makes his retellings of the story seem suspicious to me. A bit of a weird bias. He won't want to admit that he saw it because that means he's wrong to not believe in them and that would make him a hypocrite. But why did he initially tell people this is what he saw? And why change his tune so often? It's probably a bigger mystery than where these creatures actually came from. Because who's quietening him? Who's telling him don't be telling people about the frogmen? Is it his boss? Does it make his boss look bad? Is his boss being paid off by the fireworks manufacturers? Is his boss being paid off by the boot company to keep quiet about the biological splicing that's going on there? We don't know. We don't know if there's some form of human hybrid thing. Is there a deep underground military base in the area that I'm unaware of? Possibly under the fireworks factory at the office. If the office for the fireworks company could be, like 10 stories high, that means potentially it could go 10 stories below. Is that enough to have a deep underground military base where you could splice the genes of local lost iguanas and the local frog population and mix it in with children's DNA? Is that why there's so many children going missing in America? Are they all being dragged underneath the offices of fancy buildings and fancy companies? Is that why there's more and more companies in existence now? More and more CEOs and big companies with water features in the halls? Because underneath that, They're taking the 800,000 children that are kidnapped every year in America or go missing, and they're using them to splice the DNA with frogs. Is that what's going on? Is that what we're supposed to take from this? I'm not too sure in it, but what we do know is some of Mark's descriptions don't make much sense in it. Almost like he's been visited by the Men in Black for speaking out about it. Maybe Indrid Cole paid him a visit and told him to stop telling people, or maybe even made him stop telling people. Weirdly as well, it was as the story started to get bigger that he started to change his mind about the authenticity of his own accounts of the story, which is exactly around the time MIBs are said to sort of visit you and tell you to shut up. His account of the creature changed so much that the Loveland Frogman he witnessed was no longer 3 or 4 foot tall, didn't have leathery skin, no longer stood on its hind legs, and was in fact just an iguana without a tail. He also claims that he shot it and took it back to the station to prove to his colleagues that they'd all been seeing something, and that especially to prove to the other colleague that was probably getting shit from the other people that he did see something weird that night, but it was just this lizard I've put in me the dead lizard I've put in me boot. Yet now, supposedly, from what I've been reading, he refutes these things as well. It's weird. Maybe the sparks that these creatures emit and the possibility of lost time in the telling of the Bible salesman's story has got something to do with the confusion from Marky Matts. We may never know. Let's have a song. This is Diablo by Mac Miller. The last sighting, which would be the third and final sighting, there's kind of a double sighting, but not in the same way as the Ray Shockey's was with that other copper a couple hours later and the other one a few weeks later. This is all in one moment, seen by 2 people. It took place in 2016. There's not a lot going on with it really. It's another young couple, so possibly there's some form of element of sex involved, but it wasn't mentioned in any of the tellings of the story. There was no saying they were going to make out point or anything like that. What was mentioned though is the very famous, very fun AR game Pokemon Go. Now the couple were playing the game and saw a massive man-like frog, if you like, a man-like frog. A creature, if you want to call it, a frog-like creature, looking like a bloke. The witnesses, right, were called Sam Jacobs and his, from what I can tell, unnamed girlfriend. Now that means that his girlfriend is obviously the smarter of the couple because she's already made it harder for the Men in Black to find her and, force her to keep quiet, or it means the Men in Black got to his girlfriend first and made her keep a distance from the event. Like not speak to journalists and that. Now this was in the middle of August 2016, so the height of summer this time around, and it doesn't seem to follow the pattern of the other 2 collections of sightings either. It does provide a little bit of video evidence though, if you want to go and look for that. Now this is 44 years after, give or take a couple months, the 1972 sighting. So again, there's very little pattern in the sightings other than them all occurring in Loveland, not far from Madeira Road. And it came out that this sighting was just a man in a costume. But that seems really fucking convenient, doesn't it, that? Plus, it would be pretty bad for Pokemon Go if people found out they could just walk around and find Poliwrath in the real world without the need to have the location tracked. So it makes sense that they try to bury the story. Could it be possible that the game was invented for the purpose of finding otherwise invisible creatures? You have to scan the area you're in initially with the camera if you're using AR mode. Then you can choose to see the Pokemon in your screen superimposed into the real world. But what if we can't see everything that it's filming? What if back at Niantic they've got software that can scan the multiple layers of light in more spectrums than our eyes are capable of seeing? Meaning that they can track these creatures and see where they are. It would make sense because this sighting was quite early on in the game's history and seems to be the only time it happened. It's just a little something to think about for you. And I thought, for a change, to make the episode a bit more rounded and polished, I thought I'd offer some of my thoughts against the existence of the Loveland Frogmen of Ohio. Try and keep it fair, because I thought maybe around that time of the first one in 1955, there's probably a lot of trauma in the air, because I imagine a lot of the blokes had been soldiers in World War II, so they were probably dealing with some form of PTSD. Then, in 1972, they had Vietnam in the air, so maybe it was bringing up some stuff from the past for the others, and for the ones that may have been on the way or, heard about it and that. But I've got no evidence to suggest any of the 3 police officers involved served in the armed forces. But it is a possibility, I guess, because it would make sense if you're in the army to then go and be a copper, because I would imagine you've got a lot of skills that are transferable. And maybe, though, another thought on this, maybe by suffering severe trauma by being in war and conflict, maybe you're able to perceive more layers of reality. I mean, it's difficult to tell, but it would make a lot more sense, wouldn't it, if this is why people can see cryptids. Think about it. Throughout history, right, when there's been lots of stories of vampires, werewolves, ghosts, demons, dragons, monsters of any description, really, there was always war and horrible shit happening at the time back then. Loads more than what there is now. War was everywhere. Everyone was fighting and trying to kill each other with swords and that, mate. You know, not that many people would even seem to be good with a sword, so they just got killed and slaughtered. And that's trauma, mate. That's causing trauma in people. PTSD is not going to be a new thing. PTSD would have still been about back then, I would imagine. So maybe if your unconscious brain is so preoccupied with dealing and failing to deal with processing trauma, maybe it puts less effort into filtering reality, meaning you get to see what we call cryptids, but in fact are very real creatures existing alongside us in a different reality, just out of sight. We may never know. I'll fucking see you in a bit. Thanks for listening, man. If you enjoyed this, you might enjoy my other show, Truth Seeking. There's a few episodes of it on here, but it's also got its own feed. That's me and Jimmy Budd, a comedian from the UK. Like me, I'm from the UK, but I'm not a comedian, I'm a taxidermist. And if you want to buy some taxidermy, worldaroundyou.com. If you want to support this show in particular and hear lots of other stuff that's going on in my head, find the Patreon, mate. I put up an episode on here recently of an example of one of the Patreon episodes. They're about 5 minutes long, most of them, some of them 15. There's the odd hour long episode, but patreon.com/worldaroundyou. Anyway, I'll see you in a bit. Hopefully you're going to listen to some more of them.
It's so weird. This app shows that my credit score's pretty good, but I couldn't get the car loan.
Are you using myfico.com?
No, it's some other company.
Oh, you should get a MyFICO account instead. FICO scores are the ones used by 90% of lenders, and other credit scores can vary up to 100 points.
That would have been helpful yesterday.
Get the scores lenders use. Get the right FICO credit score for your credit goal, including your FICO scores used for mortgages, auto loans, and credit cards. Visit myfico.com or download the MyFICO app to get started today.